Hi folks, I'm Lynette Fast and have been very honored to have taken a look at the Fremont Gallery 92 West images for the ANAC, Association of Nebraska Art Clubs exhibition. Through my look through 60 pieces here, an amazing collection, I have selected out pieces that are considered alternative honorable mentions for attending our state conference, and 19 pieces that will go to the conference for exhibiting and then being juried, and then finally the best of show piece for this show here at the gallery. It was really exciting to do this work. I have been an educator for 40-ish years, somewhere in there. I taught in the public schools in Lincoln, and I taught art. And I had an experience all the way from K through, well, preschool through college. So I have experienced a lot of mediums and a lot of approaches to art. My background is a Bachelor of Fine Arts with the education endorsement added on. And so I do feel very confident about the different mediums and exploring the materials and expressing yourself as an artist. So I hope I've done a good job for you here, and I'm very excited to talk about the pieces that I have selected and really wish the people going on for further contest the best of luck. So first we're going to take a look at some of the honorable mention pieces that will not proceed to the contest unless someone can't attend or something happens, with a piece not being able to go. These pieces are very noteworthy. And I selected this wonderful, I call it a Joseph Cornell box, because it's an assemblage and it has a very strong message and an interesting Nebraska kind of flair to it. This pastel drawing has a very beautiful rendering of the watercolor and the water and the color in the water, along with these very subtle, very soft integrations of the sand with a bold, sharp image of the subject of the people. This watercolor has about every traditional watercolor technique in it that you could think of. There are some beautiful washes, some wonderful layovers of color, some wet brushing, dry brushing, a little splattering, some very fine detail, and just a very lovely color palette. This pottery piece is fascinating with texture and pattern. What a unique way of bringing together clay and metals and making the materials look like they go together. And in this final honorable mention piece, I have selected a photograph with a beautiful, beautiful building structure because of its surface. The photographer captured that amazing texture that you can only find on those old buildings around Nebraska, and also juxtaposed that really old peeling paint surface and colors with a flag, which obviously was there, and this really interesting kind of like blank canvas. It draws you into the piece and it makes you wonder, why is that there? Was it a poster? Are they gonna make a sign there? What's going on in the piece? Now we're gonna take a look at the pieces that I have selected to go to the Association of Nebraska Art Clubs conference. These 19 pieces will be representing the Fremont area artists and the Gallery 92 West artists. These will also be juried for awards at a state level. In Nebraska, we have a very unique competition in that way. In fact, I think we're the only state that does any kind of statewide competition. This is the first piece that I would like to talk about that I will be sending on to the Association of Nebraska Art Clubs competition. I was excited to see a digital graphic artist incorporated into the show and a fresh illustrative style. In this piece also, I was intrigued by the little items that were added onto the image. You know, there's a really skilled potter in this Fremont group, and I'm very excited to have selected this piece to go on and be juried into the statewide show. Why I especially went for this piece is the uniqueness in the subject matter, the overall complete unity of message and intent in the piece, and then also the way of being able to technically take the clay and incorporate it into a fabric kind of appearance. We have a great representation of a fairly new medium in the art world called alcohol ink. And so its selection into this group is because of its unique medium. When I made these choices, I tried to collect together a representation of people who understood their technique, their materials, and then also were relaying a very strong image and message with that. And so this alcohol ink piece demonstrates several of the qualities of working with the inks. These two pieces will go to the state show, and in this top painting selection, I was very intrigued by the repetitive pattern and symbolism printed, plus those same imagery pieces integrated into the artist's brushstroke. On the graphite drawing here, there's very high contrast in the use of the graphite, and then really nice perspective applied in the drawing of the truck, and good contrast then between those darks and lights. I was pleasantly surprised to find a lithograph in the Fremont artists. It was delightful and a surprise, and anyone who is still bringing that traditional way of creating prints to life is amazing. In this piece, however, there are really beautiful textural and contrasting value used to produce the subject. I had a hard choice on this pencil drawing. It was really close to the top for me, and it is that very strong pull of positive, negative space and the dark and the light. This graphite drawing just really draws me in. The way that the composition uses light and dark to encapsulate the subject is a beautiful approach to getting the viewer to dig in and take a look at the piece. I'd like to also introduce these two pieces as some of my selections for the state show. This watercolor shows great command and control of the medium. We see many variety of techniques, but not just everything thrown in. This has control and purposeful use of the material to represent the ideas. I also am very interested in the composition in this piece. I think the negative space in the foreground was used really nicely to frame and draw us into the subject. This painting here of the little girl at the piano reminds me of something my grandchild would do, but that's not why I picked it. But there is a very strong message in the subject, and the little girl and her face and her expression has so much emotion, and the way it's painted makes you feel that. So this artist has very great command of the material, knows how to use color, and look at all of these compositional effects, the bending arm, the piano keys, even this subtle line in the background, along with this heavy bold arm coming up to that little girl's face. This piece has a very, very strong composition. Here is a photograph that I believe is probably altered in color. At least I would think so, because of the monochromatic approach with the blues and the black, or it's actually like a very dark blue violet. And with that command of the color, also value scale from the very dark fingering, reaching in trees, encapsulating this bright little focus of light, creates an interesting movement and compositional focus in the piece. In this landscape, we see a lot of horizontal banding and emphasis in the way that the land is laid out to show perspective. However, what really draws me into it are the S-like curves that also move me back into the landscape. The watercolor is in total command here, or I should say the artist is in total command. But in this watercolor piece, we have really beautiful rendering of texture, of color, of value change, of ways of using the material to really show and exhibit what it is you want to create. The whites in this piece are what really drew me into it because of that use of white in and around on the branches, in the stream. There's a compositional movement that keeps me involved in the painting. Here's a photograph that I think, and I don't know if the artist intended this, I think it has some very strong abstract qualities to the way it's presented. The artist placed the horizon line of this close-up foreground into the middle of the painting, producing a very symmetrical, reflective look of the background into the foreground on the water. And as I looked at this piece, I wanted to take away the subject and incorporate it as a really interesting zigzag of color across the middle of the painting with more interesting color around the edges. And I kept wanting to turn my head to the side and look at it in a vertical format and really enjoy the abstract quality of that symmetrical division of the space. In this piece, we have a great assemblage, a very low relief assemblage. The artist incorporated some of the very important visual elements into the frame of the piece. I was really drawn into the way this is a focal point with all of the surrounding material being very busy, but also very interesting to look at. This artist is all about playfulness. I enjoyed very much looking at the spontaneous color, the intensity of the color in these pieces. I chose this piece to go on to the state competition because this artist is really exploring and pushing some boundaries of how to make a composition work. I had some suggestions for the artist, and I also was very intrigued by the playful quality in this work. Here's the zebras. Look at this amazing pattern zigzagging across this composition with the contrast of these stripes and high color contrast going throughout this piece. In this pastel drawing, we have a beautiful rendition of the color and the texture, and I'm very pleased with the overall focus in the composition. These trees, the bridge, they all form a framing kind of composition that brings our attention right into the center where we have this dynamic water moving through under the bridge. And finally, I have my best of show selection. I was drawn to this piece right off because of its uniqueness. When I walk into a gallery or a room, I look for the piece that goes, pay attention to me. And this one did every time I turned around and looked toward it. In fact, the curator of this show told me that it was difficult to place this piece in with the other pieces in this show. That is because of its unique style, its powerful color. What I see in this piece is a really strong use of shape and color to create movement throughout the picture space. I want to make a landscape, I want to make a seascape, I want to make something out of it, and then there's nothing there. It's intriguing to me in its subject because I do think the artist intends to purely just bring it down to the art elements and enjoy the color and the shapes and the texture and move throughout the space with that enjoyment. It's fun, it's playful, it's also a little scary in spots, but there is I would have to say, a very dynamic message in this piece.